Good evening, you're watching World News Tonight. I'm Adam Jasa. Poland will assist Ukraine with cross-border electricity supplies if Slovakia carries out a threat to stop them over a gas dispute with Kyiv. The spat follows Ukraine's decision to block Russian gas transit through its territory. More on that in just a moment, but first, let's look at tonight's headlines. Moldova faces an energy crisis after Russian gas deliveries are interrupted. After a record number of elections in 2024, more polls are on the cards this year. The first day of the new year was marred by bloody terror attacks in the United States and Europe. Poland will supply Ukraine with electricity if Slovakia halts sending power to Kyiv, a Polish EU presidency official told TVP World. Slovakia last week threatened to cut off its share of electricity for Ukraine after Kyiv stopped transit of Russian gas through Ukrainian territory. What will be the impact of this historic move for Europe and for Russia? Kazimierz Łysiak reports.
As we are entering what seems to be a pivotal year for the fate of Ukraine, Poland is once again ready to come to Kyiv's aid, this time with its energy needs.
Given the continued and persistent attacks by Russia on Ukraine's strategic energy infrastructure, Ukraine is in a very difficult situation. Polish electricity and gas transmission system operators are prepared to provide emergency assistance to Ukraine if needed.
This statement by an official from Poland's EU presidency comes only days after Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico tried his hand at political blackmail aimed at Ukraine.
After January the 1st, we will consider the possibility of reciprocal measures against Ukraine. If it is unavoidable, we will stop the supply of electricity, which Ukraine urgently needs in the event of grid failures.
And just how big of a problem would it be if Slovakia decided to go through with its threat? According to a specialist from the Polish power grid operator PSE, the European Union currently provides Ukraine with up to 2100 megawatts of electricity for all of winter. This number is divided between Poland, Hungary, Slovakia and Romania.
We have to remember that Slovak electricity exports cover between 5 to 10% of Ukraine's energy needs. And if Slovakia were to stop making transmission capacities available on the connection with Ukraine, the capacities from this border could be distributed among the remaining countries on the synchronous profile, including Poland.
Given these numbers and Poland's readiness to step in if needed, Ukrainian officials are hardly concerned by the Slovak threats.
No, I'm not. European Union knew that Ukraine is going to stop this transit and was preparing itself. Yes, there are countries like Hungary, Slovakia, which are unhappy with this, but they are unhappy with every step against Russian Federation.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has dubbed the halting of Russian gas transit through his country as a major defeat for Moscow, which has been using energy as a weapon in the war.
When Putin was presented with the Russian presidency more than 25 years ago, the annual gas transit through Ukraine to Europe totaled more than 130 billion cubic meters. Today, it equals zero.
According to one expert, Europe won't be affected that much by this change, since it has already drastically decreased its dependence on Russian energy imports.
Before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the share of Gazprom in EU's total import was around 42%. In 2023, it was only 8%.
Halting the transit, however, could be a burden for Ukraine itself.
We have to remember that Ukraine every year earn something about $1.5 billion annually. So it was a big part of Ukrainian budget.
Another analyst believes Russia will also be hurt by losing one of its major routes for exporting gas to the West.
That is compounded by further US sanctions. That is also compounded by lack of willingness on the European behalf to take any more gas via Turk Stream, it is definitely going to hurt Russia. However, most of the damage has been already done.
As US President-elect Donald Trump said on multiple occasions, he intends to end the war this year, one way or another. It is now vital for Ukraine to get through the winter, with power being a major factor for its survival.
Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico has threatened to reduce aid for Ukrainian refugees in retaliation against Kyiv's decision to halt Russian gas transfers. Joining us now for live from Kyiv with more is our Ukraine correspondent, Oz Katerji. Good evening, Oz. Has there been a response from Kyiv yet? And how likely is it that Ukraine will change its mind?
So there's been no direct response from Kyiv to Fico's latest comments, but it should be seen as a further escalation in this diplomatic row between Slovakia and Ukraine, with the threat to cut off Ukraine from EU electricity renewed, and now a further threat dealing with Ukrainian citizens in Slovakian territory. Speaking, Fico said, "We are ready to agree in a coalition to cut off electricity supplies and significantly reduce our support for Ukrainian citizens staying in the territory of the Slovak Republic." Now, as to whether this is going to change Ukraine's mind, no, this kind of blackmail isn't going to change Ukraine's mind. Ukraine gave the EU significant notice that they were not going to renew this deal, and they have followed through on that. There's no chance that Ukraine is going to back down. Now, it should be said that Ukraine has increased its energy dependency on Europe by 5-fold over 2024. So Slovakia does have leverage here to threaten Ukraine, but it's not going to have any impact. Speaking today, the foreign minister, Sybiha, said, "We have cut off some of Putin's last leverage over Europe and his use of energy as a weapon." So really quite firm words coming out of Kyiv that really show no intention of backing down and resuming gas transfers to Europe. But where this diplomatic row between Slovakia and indeed Hungary, where they position themselves going forward with Kyiv, remains to be seen. Back to you in the studio, Adam.
Thank you for this report. Stay safe. Ukraine's decision not to extend the gas transit deal with Russia sparked an energy crisis in the tiny Central European nation of Moldova. Bordering Ukraine from the south, Moldova and its Russian-influenced region of Transnistria are struggling to provide electricity and heating to their citizens. Katarzyna Nowicka has more.
Homes are going cold after large-scale gas cutoffs began in Moldova's pro-Russian breakaway region of Transnistria.
This year did not start out easy. Yes, there is a problem. The gas supplies were cut off, but, well, we had been preparing for it.
The separatist region was left without Russian gas after Ukraine's 5-year transit deal with Russia was halted. Kyiv staunchly opposes funding Putin's war machine. The local energy company issued recommendations, such as sealing windows and balcony doors, covering them with blankets, and dressing warmly. Until recently, Russia supplied Transnistria with some 2 billion cubic meters of gas per year, part of which was later sold to Moldova. The rest of Moldova has been independent of Russian supplies since 2023, purchasing on European markets instead.
The losses Putin is going to incur with this transit halt to Europe are not going to be really very dramatic. There are other things, and there are many other signs testifying that he's running out of resources.
We're treating this not as an energy crisis, but as a security crisis induced by Russia to destabilize Moldova, both economically and socially.
Officials in Transnistria argue that Moldova is simply trying to transfer its outlandish Gazprom debt, some $700 million, to the unrecognized republic.
They reprinted Gazprom's letter. They changed the names and addresses and sent it to Tiraspol Transgas in Transnistria. This is a direct lie, a provocation.
German media Deutsche Welle reports that Russia has failed to reserve any capacity to supply Transnistria via its pipeline from Turkey. Now, worries of a humanitarian crisis and the end of the region's de facto independence are on the rise.
The world saw a record 74 elections in 2024, in which more than 1.6 billion voters could cast ballots. More votes are due in 2025. What are the key races and their potential implications domestically and internationally? Sonia Agata-Bishen reports.
After the conclusion of numerous major elections in 2024, such as the US presidential vote,
America has given us an unprecedented and powerful mandate.
we are taking a look at what to expect from elections coming up in 2025. With various presidential, parliamentary and federal elections across Europe and beyond, there is a lot to unpack.
If 2024 was defined as one of the biggest electoral year, 2025 is probably the same, not in terms of numbers of elections, but in terms of the political importance.
Polls are set to cast votes in May 2025. At present, the two leading contenders in the polls are Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski, nominated by the centrist Civic Coalition, and Karol Nawrocki, backed by the former ruling right-wing party Law and Justice. The stakes are high. If Law and Justice maintains influence over the presidency, it could further obstruct Donald Tusk's government, leaving the administration paralyzed until 2027. Abroad, one of the first elections takes place across Poland's eastern border, in Belarus. Alexander Lukashenko, Belarus's president of 30 years, will run for a seventh term in what experts in Belarusian opposition describe as a farce, a sham election.
First of all, we don't call it elections. In Belarus, it's ritual, Soviet-style type ritual. It's reappointment of Lukashenko by Lukashenko himself. So, of course, this event will not make Lukashenko legitimate in the eyes of Belarusian people.
A wave of protests swept through the country after the widely contested 2020 elections. The regime's brutal response led to an exodus of thousands of Belarusians.
Belarus is probably the most significant in terms of Polish security. Of course, we don't expect big changes because of the Belarusian regime. However, this election, in the context of the Ukraine war and of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, are really, really important.
Following the collapse of Chancellor Olaf Scholz's freeway coalition and his subsequent loss of a confidence vote in the Bundestag, snap elections are set for February 23rd. Polls favor the opposition center-right Christian Democrats and their sister party Christian Social Union. But coming in second is the hard-right Alternative for Germany, known for its pro-Russian sentiments and desire for Germany to leave the EU.
We shall not forget one important issue, and this issue is the future coalition partner of the CDU-CSU in building the government, because that will influence highly not only China policy, but also security and defense policy vis-à-vis Russia and Ukraine.
Several countries noted Russian interference in their 2024 elections. In Romania, Călin Georgescu, a critic of both the EU and NATO, unexpectedly topped the polls in the first round of the presidential vote following a controversial TikTok campaign. The results were annulled over alleged Russian influence, with new elections set for 2025.
The first round of elections should be organized sometime in March, but with all these problems lagging behind him and with all these question marks above his head, I have the tendency to believe that Călin Georgescu will not be allowed to participate again in the election.
Another country to have reported Russian interference in its 2024 election was the EU candidate Moldova. Pro-European Maia Sandu eventually won the presidential elections there, but the political dynamic in the country may shift in the 2025 parliamentary elections. If Sandu's party fails to win a majority, Moldova's road to the EU membership will be impeded.
This major victory on the 3rd of November will not happen again at the parliamentary elections, and in my opinion, we will see a resurrection of the Russian interests here in Moldova.
Poland's southwestern neighbors in the Czech Republic are also set to cast ballots in 2025. The latest polls give ANO, led by populist Andrej Babiš, 34.5% of the vote, well ahead of its closest rivals. Babiš's victory would strengthen a far-right axis in Central Europe, which includes Hungary's Viktor Orban and Slovakia's Robert Fico. The billionaire former prime minister has been dubbed Czech Trump by his opponents. With rising geopolitical tensions, the importance of the upcoming elections transcends the pursuit of democratic values.
The upcoming 80th anniversary of the liberation of the German Nazi death camp Auschwitz is proving to be a diplomatic headache for Poland and Israel, as questions arise over whether Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will attend the event on January 27th. Poland has signaled reluctance to host Netanyahu because of an arrest warrant on him issued by the International Criminal Court. For more on this, let's go live to our correspondent in Tel Aviv, Diana Skaya. Good evening, Diana. What do we know about who will represent Israel at the Auschwitz ceremony with other world leaders?
Good evening, Adam. Well, it's exactly how you said it. I mean, the event hasn't even taken place, and it's definitely already a diplomatic headache. I mean, there's already a Jewish organization in the United States that canceled its trip to Poland on January 27. Now, what we know from Israeli media here reporting that Benjamin Netanyahu never even confirmed or never even said that he would attend the ceremony to begin with. Instead, what we do know and what Israeli media is reporting that Israel's education minister, Yoav Kish, is expected to be in Poland in January to attend the ceremony. Now, of course, the Israeli media has obviously not also given a specific reason as to why Netanyahu would not come. Now, for an answer, I actually reached out to the Prime Minister's office in Jerusalem myself earlier today. However, as of yet, I have still not received a response or a confirmation. Adam?
Thank you, Diana, for this report. Welcoming in the new year is supposed to be a joyous celebration, but first responders around the world dread this period due to the high number of accidents, fires and violent attacks. This year, bloody violence struck in the United States and the tiny Western Balkan nation of Montenegro. Gabriela Fesnak reports.
At least 12 people were killed and many more injured after a 45-year-old gunman opened fire in a bar in Montenegro on Wednesday night.
After an altercation with other patrons he'd been there with, an incident occurred between him and another person. He then went home, grabbed a weapon and used it to kill 4 people at one location.
The Montenegro shooter died from self-inflicted gunshot wounds while in police custody. The attack sent shockwaves throughout the country and prompted the Prime Minister to consider a ban on firearms.
This is a tragedy after which we must ask ourselves who should be allowed to possess firearms in Montenegro.
Police statistics show that the end of the year period is one of the most violent times of the year.
On one hand, holidays means also increased emotions, including anxiety, stress, loneliness. That triggers aggressive and antisocial behavior. Moreover, celebrations are often related to alcohol, and alcohol, again, is a trigger for such behavior.
According to experts, since New Year celebrations are often mass gatherings, terrorist organizations see them as an opportunity to create a mass casualty event. U.S. authorities are currently investigating a possible link between 2 deadly incidents which took place on Wednesday. In New Orleans, 15 people were killed after a U.S.-born citizen from Texas rammed into a crowd with a pickup truck, while in Las Vegas, a Tesla Cybertruck exploded just outside of the Trump Hotel.
We are investigating a number of leads, and I'm not prepared to release any of that information to you just yet. I can tell you that there are 7 victims right now that sustained injuries from the explosion.
Not much is yet known about the Las Vegas attacker. The perpetrator of the New Orleans attack was, however, found to have had an ISIS flag as well as explosives in his truck.
It was very intentional behavior. This man was trying to run over as many people as he possibly could.
Wednesday attacks are not the only mass casualty events that took place in the holiday period. Just 4 days before Christmas Eve, a truck plowed into the crowd at a Magdeburg Christmas market, killing 5 people and injuring more than 200.
The remaining gas deliveries from Russia to Europe were seriously curtailed on January 1st as Ukraine delivered on a promise to shut pipeline transit through its territory, affecting European Union members Slovakia and Hungary, as well as candidate country Moldova. Slovakia threatened to retaliate against Kyiv by stopping electricity supplies. Poland said it would step into the breach by providing an alternative supply of electricity to Ukraine. To discuss these developments, I'm joined by Szymon Kardaś, Senior Policy Fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening.
So, how serious is this decision by Ukraine to stop Russian gas deliveries to Europe?
I would say that it's rather symbolic. It's historical, but it's rather symbolic. Why? Because actually the EU's dependence on Russian gas, and particularly EU's dependence on the Ukrainian transit route, was not significant last year. I mean, the crucial year was 2022, when actually Russia decided to significantly decrease or even cut off supplies to many EU customers. And the volumes that were running through Ukraine were not significant in 2023, 2024. There were around 15 BCM. I mean, if we compare it to...
BCM, if you could break it down for us.
a billion cubic meters.
Right.
If we compare to volumes that were running through Ukraine like 2 decades ago, more than 100 BCMs, I mean,
So the symbolic nature of this is that in the past it was Ukraine that stopped deliveries to Ukraine, and now Ukraine was able to say, we don't want this transit anymore, right?
Yeah. Before it was, I mean, mainly there were decisions taken by Russians, and now Ukraine. And actually the decision that was expected, because it was articulated quite clearly by the Ukrainian government many months ago that Kyiv is not willing to extend the transit deals that were supposed to expire by the end.
This is interesting, because Slovakia and Hungary obviously did not take those pronouncements seriously.
Yes, but on the other hand, I mean, both countries, or actually we should include Austria into this group, because Hungary is actually receiving most of the Russian gas through the Turk Stream pipeline, I mean the pipeline that is running through the Black Sea. There are two lines. One, which was designed to supply the Turkish market, and the second line, which is a transit one, and that Russia is using to supply countries like Hungary, for instance. So actually, when it comes to Ukrainian transit route, it was mainly the cause of concern for Slovakia and Austria recently. So both countries actually made preparations. I mean, they started to prepare.
Okay, so then tell us, what is it about? If they made preparations, if the volumes aren't huge, so why is this blackmail by Slovakia about, stopping electricity supplies to Ukraine at a time when, bombs are falling on critical infrastructure in Ukraine?
First of all, I mean, when it comes to both countries, so Slovakia and Austria, I mean, the level of dependence on Russian gas was quite high in terms of domestic needs. Hungary, according to the data for 2023, was dependent at the level of 98%, so it was quite high level of dependence. When it comes to Slovakia, it was a bit lower, but still, I mean, the level of dependence was high. So the volumes were not significant, but for those countries, the supplies coming from Russia were quite important. But actually, I mean, the main reason, particularly when it comes to countries like Slovakia or Hungary, is political. I mean, for those countries, strike, and especially when it comes to Slovakia, especially under current political leadership, it's the political interest in maintaining energy ties with Russia.
So this is why Mr. Fico went to Moscow.
Exactly.
And this is why he said we want to restore economic relationship as quickly as this is possible.
Exactly. I mean, basically following the path that Viktor Orban is walking for many, many years. Hungary is probably the best or the worst example in the European Union when it comes to its approach towards Russia, because Viktor Orban is not only interested in maintaining energy cooperation in the gas sphere. Russia remains the key gas supplier to Hungary, but Viktor Orban is also interested in maintaining ties in the oil sector and in the nuclear sector. So this is basically an idea of maintaining energy cooperation, fruitful energy cooperation with Russia in the long run. And
does it explain why both countries insist on peace now, and regardless of conditions for peace?
Well, it's partly linked. And when it comes to Slovakia, there is one more one more puzzle that we should add to this picture. Slovakia was also a transit country for Russian gas. And there is still an agreement that is enforced by until 2028, the transit deal concluded between Russia and Slovakia for transit of Russian gas through Slovakian territory.
So to Austria, right?
To Austria and previously, I mean, also to other customers that are not buying Russian gas anymore.
Right.
But Slovakia was also a country that was gaining some benefits from the transit of Russian gas. So it's not, to some extent, it's not surprising that they are opposing, the current state of play, because, they were not only buying the cheap, in their view, Russian gas, but also they were the transit country for Russian gas, and now they will not be able to gain some benefits.
And going back to this threat of cutting electricity supplies, can Slovakia do this? Because I've seen opinions that it's not actually feasible because they would need permission from other electrical grid operators in Europe to actually cut supplies to Ukraine, or is that just wishful thinking?
It would not be easy in the first place, but even if Slovakia manages to somehow decrease the option of import of electricity from Slovakia, there are other EU member states which
Poland said it would
can step in. Yeah, exactly. Poland is one of those countries, but Romania is the second one. And actually, since the moment when both Moldova and Ukraine were synchronized with the EU electricity grid, which happened in March 2022, there are many options for providing support in terms of electricity supplies to Ukraine. So Slovakia is not the only, route that...
Right, but there's one country that apparently is suffering from this end of transit, and this is Moldova, which generates 60% of its electricity through gas-powered plants. So how can Moldova cope with this situation, or how should Europe help Moldova cope with this situation?
Yeah, here the issue is quite complicated, because actually, on the one hand, Moldova is not importing Russian gas directly. The part of Moldova that is controlled by the Moldovan government. But Russia still supplies Transnistria, which is a separatist region.
But now it doesn't.
Yeah, used to supply, but before the decision taken by Ukraine regarding the transit. So Russia used to supply Transnistria with around 2 billion cubic meters of natural gas annually. And this gas was actually used for the gas-fired power plant located in Transnistria that produced electricity not only for domestic needs, so not only for Transnistria needs,
but for the entire country.
Exactly, but for the entire country. And actually, the rest of the country was dependent at the level of around 80% on the import of electricity from Transnistria. So this is an issue, and there are a few options on the table.
Please tell us, what are they?
One option, if the current state of play, if the current situation remains, so if Russia is not willing to supply Transnistria using the other route, and the alternative route is through the so-called Trans-Balkan pipeline. So if there are no gas supplies to Transnistria, then, of course, it would be the responsibility of the Moldovan government to purchase additional volumes of natural gas on spot markets, which is actually quite
But for Europe, this would be peanuts. For the European Union to help Moldova cope with this would be peanuts.
Exactly, but someone has to pay for it. Yeah. Right. So I know that. It's peanuts in terms of the amount of money that we as Europeans spend annually on fossil fuels.
But strategically for Europe. Europe wants Moldova to become part of the bloc and to stop being dependent on Russia. So that's presumably a price worth paying.
Yeah. So in that sense, we should step in and we should help. And this is one scenario, but it will be quite costly, and it would depend, of course, on the political will of EU member states or the friends of Moldova to provide the needed support. And actually, this is a challenging thing because Moldova was not able, didn't make his homework, during 2024.
Okay.
Because
so it is, we have to gradually finish our conversation, but there is a problem there with Moldova.
Exactly.
But going back to what you said at the beginning about the symbolism of all of this, is this the final nail in the coffin of Russian gas deliveries to Europe?
No, unfortunately, because first of all, there are still pipeline supplies through the Turk Stream pipeline,
but the volumes are not as high.
Yeah, of course. They are incomparable with the volumes that were coming to Europe before the war. Yeah, 155 billion cubic meters in 2021, comparing to around 25 in 2023. Those volumes are incomparable. So if there is no transit through Ukraine, of course, it's another decrease of Russian supplies to the EU through pipelines. So the only remaining route is the Turk Stream, but there is one more challenge, and it's LNG. It's the Russian LNG that it's still coming.
But soon we will have US LNG from the new US administration.
We already have US LNG in quite significant volumes. Yeah. So, but the Russian LNG is still coming, and unfortunately, countries like France, like Spain, like Belgium, are still importing. The volumes are not high, but the presence is visible. So it's unfortunately not the final nail to the coffin, but we are getting close to that moment.
Thank you so much for your comments. Thank you very much for watching. This is all we have for you tonight. See you tomorrow.